2461 Brave Old World. Sunny swayed, struggling to stay on his feet. Damnation. He was impossibly weak. He was terribly frail. He was beaten and battered, exhausted beyond imagination, and ready to collapse. His body was tortuously slow and clumsy, and on top of that, he was limited to only being aware of what was in front of his eyes. The shadows did not respond to his senses, and without them, he felt blind like a bat. It seemed impossible that anyone could exist in this pitifully powerless, woefully limited, and creepily dull state. Wait, isn't that simply what being mundane felt like? Sunny blinked a few times in complete shock. Right, he was not under some harrowing hex that maimed his body and soul. He was simply reduced to being mundane once again. In fact, he was far stronger, faster, and resilient than he had ever been as a mundane person. After all, he was currently in a somewhat ragged, but still trained and tampered body of a well-fed adult, not that of a malnourished teenager. He was Detective Sunny of the Mirage City Police Department. What the actual? Before, his memories seemed like a dream, while the devil detective's personality felt like his true self. Now, the positions were reversed. Sunny was himself once again, while the memories of the jaded detective felt like a vague, distant dream. The senses of his other incarnations were just as vague, as if reaching him through a vast mass of water, or maybe through the silver surface of a great mirror. He was in a mundane body. He did not have his aspect or his attributes, no essence, no cores. His domain was gone. He did not have his shades and shadows, either, while his own shadow was not an invaluable helper anymore. It was just silent and unresponsive, following him like a dead thing. Just a few moments before, this simplistic and inadequate state of existence seemed perfectly normal to him. But now, Sunny felt like he had been crippled, like all his limbs had been severed, and all his senses were dulled. It felt terrible. He grabbed Effie's hand desperately and used it as support to keep himself from falling. A low groan escaped from his lips, followed by a stifled curse. Curses. As Sunny was trying to come to terms with being mundane once again, a perplexed voice resounded above his head. "Hey there, buddy, are you all right? Mr. Devil Detective." Looking up in dismay, Sunny grimaced and spat through gritted teeth. "What damn devil detective? No, I'm not all right. I am mundane." Effie stared at him in confusion for a couple of moments. Then, her eyes widened. "Shadow Boy, is that really you? You remembered?" Sunny let go of Effie's hand and straightened, slowly regaining his composure. "Stop calling me Shadow Boy, damn it. And, yes, it's me. I did remember. How the hell?" But before he could finish talking, Effie suddenly pressed her palm against his mouth, shutting him up. Surprise and confusion drained from her eyes, replaced by alarm. Looking around warily, she remained silent for a few moments, and then said, "Not here, not where someone can hear us. How about we go find somewhere more private to talk?" Sunny frowned, then gestured to the car. It was only then that Effie removed her hand and grinned. "Well then, let's go, partner. Personally, I, a rookie homicide detective of Mirage PD, am starving." "What about you?" He wanted to retort, but couldn't, because now that he was mundane, he suddenly needed to eat food as sustenance again. So, actually, Sunny was quite hungry too. What a chore. "Yeah, I can eat." She studied him for a moment, then nodded and climbed into the car. Sunny did, as well, finding himself in the driver's seat. A completely unfamiliar control system met him, which he somehow knew how to operate. After spending a few seconds studying the weird PTV's dashboard, Sunny inserted the key into the ignition with a dubious expression, then gave it a tentative turn. The PTV roared with a level of noise that could only be called obnoxious, vibrated like a trembling animal dying from fear in front of a predator, and spat a thick stream of noxious gas from its back. Sunny blinked a few times, aghast at the barbarity of this primitive machine, and looked at Effie. He had already surmised that the odd world they had found themselves in resembled the waking world before the dark times, but this was an entirely new level of absurdity. Did people really drive these monstrous things? Effie arched an eyebrow. "How would I know?" Sunny put his hands on the wheel and sighed. Fair. He spent a few moments allowing the muscle memory of the devil detective to take over, and a few more convincing himself to trust it. Then, he drove off, painfully aware that since he was somehow a mundane human again, driving the archaic PTV into a street lamp may very well result in his death. It was really quite offensive. Him, the sovereign of death, being killed by a street lamp. Who the hell would actually go and die from something as frivolous as a high-speed collision? Luckily, he did not hit anything immediately, and after a minute or two, controlling the loud, stench-producing machine started to feel natural to him. He even got used to the weird vibrations until they blended into the background. Where are we going? Effie shrugged. Try to dig in the fake U's memory, find a rundown and desolate diner he used to frequent. Considering that grumpy malcontent's character, there should be at least one. Sunny tried not to think about how weird the advice was and did just that. He tried to reach into the devil detective's memory, and after a while, a location did magically come to his mind, complete with the knowledge on how to get there. Single quote. How convenient. It was very strange. He narrowed his eyes and sent the PTV rolling in the right direction. Before too long, though, it let out a series of strange noises and abruptly grew quiet, seemingly losing power. Sunny barely managed to park it at the side of the road before the vehicle completely lost momentum. Both he and Effie were startled and confused. What is wrong with it? Sunny stared at the unfamiliar dashboard, then turned the key this way and that. The PTV let out a few suffocating sniffles, but did not start again. The two of them looked at each other. After a while, Effie offered a suggestion in an uncertain tone. Is it out of power? Do we need to charge it? Sunny scratched the back of his head. I'm not sure. Maybe. How do we charge this thing, though? He thought for a bit, then said hesitantly. I think it's more like a military PTV than a normal one. I mean, it can self-charge if you deposit a fuel cell into it. Effie coughed. I think they use liquid fuel. Some kind of petroleum derivative. That stuff was still abundant before the dark times. Sunny stared at her with wide eyes. Are you crazy? What kind of idiot would fuel their vehicle with a flammable substance? Effie blinked a couple of times. Oh, this vehicle is using an internal combustion engine. Basically, it moves by harnessing the power of numerous tiny explosions. We learned about them in history class, that's why that thing over there is called the ignition. Sunny laughed. Yeah, right, millions of people riding around on streams of tiny explosions. Effie's jokes were really too much. Noticing that she was looking at him earnestly, though, Sunny slowly lost the smile. Wait, you're being serious? He looked down, at the place where the PTV's engine was hidden, with a hint of horror in his eyes. After a while, Sunny inhaled deeply and shook his head. No wonder these people blew up half of the world. 2462 before the dark times. It took Sunny some time to remember that the devil detective had kept a canister of fuel in the trunk of the archaic PTV. Then, it took him some more time to figure out how to deposit the appallingly pungent liquid into the vehicle, all the while being soaked in rain and cursing under his breath. Being in the rain actually made him uncomfortably cold. Sunny had almost forgotten the feeling of being powerless in the face of the elements, so it was somewhat of a novel experience for him. Needless to say, he climbed back into the PTV in a foul mood. Looking at Effie with a deep scowl, he suppressed a heavy sigh and asked. Is your mundane alter ego also a sleep-deprived, rage-fueled wreck craving nothing more than an unhealthy dose of nicotine and alcohol? She laughed and shook her head. Nope, I am basically a shining example of how regular exercise and a healthy lifestyle are good for you. I mean, sure, becoming mundane all of a sudden was a bit disorienting, but actually, I am enjoying myself. Brimming with vitality, Effie gestured to her toned, tantalizing body. It's interesting. I was never both able-bodied and mundane, so, this is a new experience for me. Sunny's stare turned bitter. I see. Looking away, he started the car and sent it rolling forward again. As they drove to their destination, he could appreciate the vistas of Mirage City from a new perspective. Sunny knew, of course, what cities before the dark times looked like, but only from archival footage, webtoon illustrations, and movie sets. Seeing it all with his own two eyes, and in great detail, was completely different. He couldn't help but feel put off by how different everything looked. There were no barriers surrounding the city, no alloy towers, no isolation domes around active nightmare gates peppered here and there. The air was of course breathable, and the citizens did not seem afraid of the rain, as if there was no possibility of it turning to acid. The architecture was entirely foreign to what he was used to, and the buildings themselves were many times lower than they were in NQSC, despite the fact that they were built exclusively up, with almost no subterranean levels. There were no layers to the city, just one flat surface with hills and small mountains rising here and there. Everything seemed so simple and relaxed, even if it had felt overwhelming and permeated by crushing tension to the devil detective. How large do you think this city is? Quote, Effie contemplated for a moment. I think it has a population of around 10 million. 20-something millions, including the greater metropolitan area. Sunny's eyes widened a little. 20 million people. That's tiny. From the impression he had gotten from the vague memories of the Devil Detective, Mirage City was a sprawling metropolis suffocating in a flood of human sins. However, 10 million, even 20 or 30, was positively a tiny amount. There had been many times more people living just in the outskirts of NQSC, let alone in the city itself, with its population in the hundreds of millions. Mirage City was a village. And despite that, it somehow managed to look crowded. Perhaps because everyone had somehow gotten a PTV license instead of using public transport like normal people did. As a result, not only was the air full of noxious fumes and noise, but the traffic also prevented anyone from getting anywhere in a timely fashion. People were simply stuck on the road, their vehicles crawling at such a low speed that even the pedestrians could outpace them. Nevertheless, the pedestrians, actual people, were reduced to a subservient species in their own city, fearfully clinging to the sides of the streets to make way for the actual dominant creatures, the PTVs. And those weren't even cargo PTVs, either, almost all of them were for personal use. It didn't make any sense. Does no one here notice how absurd the citation is? What is the city management doing? No, actually, if he remembered correctly, countless people did use a public transport network here, mostly the underground trains. It was just that the network was similarly inadequate and failed to serve even such a tiny population, resulting in overcrowding and unbearably bleak peak traffic hours. Well, that last part actually made sense. With the primitive technology of the days before the dark times and no spelltech, digging underground tunnels must have been a real chore. However, the very reason why they had to be dug underground in the first place was that the surface roads were usurped by personal vehicles. Underground tunnels, somewhere far away, one of Sunny's incarnations looked up with a glint in his eyes. Bastion was only starting to develop its own public transport networks, and there was no modern technology or spelltech in the dream realm either. However, there was Sunny. And Sunny had the shade of abundance at his disposal. How long would it take the sacred worm to create a vast network of tunnels under Bastion, to serve as the foundation of a future metro system? Not long at all. Should I discuss it with Cassie? We'll need some engineers, sure, well, a lot of them, but as long as they remain unaware of how the tunnels will be created and who will create them, it can work splendidly. Sunny was distracted for a while, and by the time he came back to his senses, they were already near the ramshackle diner the Devil Detective used to frequent. If he was generous, the place could be called quaint and unassuming. If he wasn't, though, he'd call it a trash heap masquerading as an establishment where people were supposed to eat. The diner was small, shabby, and exceedingly sparse in decor. There was no decor to be mentioned, really, just a few cheap tables with similarly cheap chairs. It was mostly used by blue-collar workers, so there were only guests here during the lunch hours and in the evening, when people got off work. At the moment, the place was completely empty, with the exception of a grumpy waitress who disappeared somewhere immediately after delivering their order. The food, however, was miraculous. Oh gods! Sunny stared at Effie with wide eyes. Effie was similarly looking at him with an enraptured expression. There was unlimited clean drinking water. Every dish was made entirely from natural ingredients, with not a single synthetic morsel in sight. The flavors were rich, the side dishes were fresh, and could be refilled endlessly, and the portions were exceedingly generous. Despite all that, the meal was dirt cheap. How is this possible? Very few people in NQSC could afford to eat like this, and even those who could would have to pay an insane amount of credits for such an amazing meal. The situation was a little better in the dream realm, but even there, most food was still synthetic and being imported from the waking world. Am I in heaven? For a while, Sunny was uncomfortably similar to Effie, practically inhaling the delicious food with little to no table manners and ordering more and more of it. After a while, extremely satiated and feeling sleepy from all the food, he looked at her groggily and asked, "By the way, why did you insist that we should talk in a private place?" Effie leaned back, eased her waistband, and patted her flat belly with a deeply satisfied grin. "Oh, it's nothing major. Just that, we'll probably die horribly if the locals notice us breaking character." 2463 The Lives of Others. Sunny lingered for a few moments, then threw a brief glance at the door behind which the waitress had disappeared. No one else was in the deserted diner, and the pedestrians rushing past the dirty window could not hear them. He raised an eyebrow. How so? Effie let out a long sigh and poured herself a cup of water before speaking again. Eventually, she leaned back and said in a low tone. Well, I don't know how you came about, but I was home, the home of the newly promoted Detective Athena of Mirage PD, that is. A married woman with a loving husband and an adorable kid, a couple of adorable kids, actually, a boy and a girl. Needless to say, those were not my kids and not my husband. So, when he went for a kiss, I was understandably not having it. Sunny frowned. Wait, you were aware of who you really are from the start? Effie nodded. Yes. We entered the Hall of Imagination, then, my memory is a bit hazy. The next thing I knew, I was standing in a living room, folding laundry. I was alone, mundane, and completely turned around. Before I could really figure out what had happened, I was assaulted by two overly enthusiastic kids who wanted to play cops and robbers with mommy. Sunny scratched the back of his head. What the hell is cops and robbers? Effie scoffed. It's a local version of Awakened and Abominations, naturally. Anyway, yes, I was never under the illusion that I was the real Detective Athena. The kids were sweet and adorable, so even though I was weirded out of my mind, I went along with what was happening and tried to slowly regain my bearings while playing with them. That was how I figured out the basic facts about this place and learned to rummage in my counterpart's memories. So, everything went well, until her husband showed up. Sunny smiled darkly. What, did you smack him when he went for a smooch? Effie let out a joyless chuckle. No, maybe I would have, but my instincts are still those of a saint. You know how it is, we need to be careful around mundane people, so the thought of striking him never even crossed my mind. I just dodged away and let him know in no uncertain terms that there would be no smooching, kissing, squeezing, fondling, or canoodling of any kind. Sunny gave her an exasperated look. I don't need the details, you know. She grinned. Why, not a fan of canoodling? That is not what Neff. Sunny scoffed. Hey, lady, I am not a fan, I am the artist. Effie stared at him silently for a few long moments, then threw her head back and exploded with laughter. Oh, gods. Did you really just say that? Sunny raised his chin defiantly and suppressed a smile. I did. Not only did I say it, but I also meant every word. She continued to laugh for a while longer, then wiped the tears off the corners of her eyes and looked at him with a wry smile. You know, Shishay Dao boy, you are actually not that scary up close, are you? Sunny shrugged. Not unless you are scared of innocuous stuff like dark demigods who command legions of dead souls and condemn you to eternal servitude, with not even death offering escape, I guess. Effie grinned. Right, she studied him for a bit, then sighed. Well, in any case. The second I refused the affections of that man, the moment I broke character, something very creepy happened. He frowned. What? Effie gulped down her water and looked into the distance with a somber expression. He changed. Even creepier, though, was the fact that the kids changed, too. It was not that they turned into some grotesque nightmare creatures or displayed dreadful powers, they just sort of froze, turned to look at me in eerie synchronicity, and stared. They still looked human, but there was nothing human about them at that moment. I don't know how to describe it, but there was something deeply wrong deep in their eyes. Something empty and utterly alien to what a human, or even an abomination, should be. Sunny's frown deepened. Sounds familiar. Effie nodded curtly. Yes, it was, indeed, familiar. In fact, I've seen eyes like those before. She looked into the window, at the torrent of passers-by rushing along under a river of umbrellas. I saw it during the war, in Bastion, when one of the others pretended to be Ether. Sunny's eyes narrowed, and a shiver ran down his spine. You mean? Effie looked at him darkly. Yes. My supposed husband, the adorable kids, the cops on the crime scene, the black snakes, the waitress who served us food, and the rest of those 20 million so-called people living in Mirage City, or all others. Sunny froze, suddenly paralyzed by fear. It was not often that he felt fear these days. But the thought of 20 million others surrounding him from all sides more than deserved the honor of frightening him. In fact, if Sunny's ability to feel frightened had not deteriorated awfully after more than a decade of suffering all kinds of horrors, he would have been utterly terrified right now. Turning his head slowly, Sunny looked at the constant stream of pedestrians outside the window, the flood of noisy PTVs behind them, and the crowded forest of tall buildings stretching beyond the horizon. Suddenly, Mirage City did not seem so tiny anymore. It seemed like a boundless abyss containing unfathomable depths of terror instead. Effie grimaced. Look, you are a supreme who has become a powerless mundane human. While they are the others who were made into powerless mundane humans. And as long as everyone plays their roles faithfully, they are bound by these roles, unable to be anything but what their characters are supposed to be. Luckily, I resumed acting like Detective Effie in time, and my creepy family returned to being normal as if nothing had happened. She smiled. So, you can understand why I had to be careful when we first met. I was happy to see you, but also, I wasn't sure that you were, you. I kept thinking, is this the real Lord of Shadows, or is this another who just happens to look like the Lord of Shadows? I couldn't just ask, since that would mean breaking character, so I decided to play along and see how things go. Inhaling slowly, Sunny looked back at Effie, lingered for a few moments, and asked in an even tone. Are you sure that everyone here is another? She shrugged. Reasonably sure. Naturally, nobody really knows that much about the others. However, Effie sighed and poured herself more water. It would make sense, wouldn't it? Clan Valor had always been wary of the others, that was because the others sometimes escaped from the Great Mirror. They came from the other side of Reflections, from True Bastion. But how did they come to be there, and where did they come from? Well, if the Great Mirror in False Bastion is really no more than a reflection of the true Great Mirror, then what if that is where they dwell? They are trapped inside the true Great Mirror, and now, we are too. Sunny inhaled slowly. Yes, that does make sense, I guess. Effie chewed her lip, then said quietly. It's the damn demon of imagination, Mirage, or whatever her name was. She created Rivergate, Bastion, and the Great Mirror. She must have put the others into the hidden realm inside the Great Mirror, as well. Hell, she might have created the eerie creeps, for all we know. Sunny tilted his head a little. But why would an illusory realm, created by the demon of imagination, resemble an Earth city from before the dark times? Quote, Effie looked around and smiled faintly. That is the question, isn't it? 2464 Palace of Imagination. Sunny remained silent for a while, contemplating, then said slowly. Unless, Mirage wasn't the one who created this city at all. Effie gave him a dubious look. If not the great and terrible demon of imagination, then who? This place is literally called Mirage City, for spell's sake. Sunny shook his head. Think about it. Mirage might have created Bastion, both its true and illusory versions, but that is not all Bastion is. It has been taken by the spell and turned into a citadel, a great citadel, no less. So, just like with other citadels, the spell would have taken what made this place special and given its master a way to use it, turning it into a component. Effie wrinkled her nose. I don't follow. Are you saying that I, the current master of Bastion, created Mirage City? Sunny shook his head again. No, I don't think that it was you. I think that someone has co-opted that component of Bastion and created Mirage City in your stead. He hesitated for a few moments, then added. Naturally, we don't know a lot about the demon of imagination. However, we know that her powers had to do with fantasies, illusions, and fanciful things, like fairy tale castles rising from the clouds reflected on the surface of water. And that her hobbies included creating lakes and tinkering with mirrors. Sunny smiled faintly. So, what would be hidden in the heart of her cloud castle? A awful weapon, a prison for eerie beings from the reflections. No, I think that this place, this dreadful city imprisoning millions of others, is a playground. Effie laughed. Wait, a playground? First a toy room, now a playground. Is this your weird way of making up for a dull childhood? Sunny scoffed. I wish. No, but I do think that this place, the Palace of Imagination, is created to be a playground of sorts. A realm where anything Mirage imagined would become reality, just like the illusory Bastion, only devoid of permanence, capable of changing according to her every whim. Complete with beings to populate that reality and play whatever roles she wanted them to. After all, the only thing the demon of imagination could not create was living beings, that was something only the gods could do. Well, and Nether. Effie leaned back and frowned. But, the demon of imagination is gone, and this playground of hers was turned into a component of Bastion by the nightmare spell, thus allowing Awaken to control it. Sunny nodded. Only the original masters of Bastion, Warden and Anvil, never discovered the mirror maze, and never made it to the Palace of Imagination. Instead, someone else slipped his way here, and made this place his. Effie's frown deepened. Mordred. Her tone was not at all enthused. In fact, Sunny had rarely heard his easygoing friend sound so somber. He was not too happy, either. It was either him or Morgan. Had to be. I don't know whether they created this city consciously or if the Great Mirror simply extracted the blueprint from their subconscious, but it was definitely one of them. Effie blinked a couple of times. Right, Morgan is also here, but we have no idea where either of them is. Sunny smirked. Says who? Actually, I have already located both Morgan and Mordred. Oh, I also found Saint while I was at it. Effie blinked a few times. When did you? Actually, never mind. Wow, Shadow Boy, you really do work fast. So fast, in fact, that it makes me wonder if you're as quick in. Sunny gave her chair a kick under the table, winced at the pain in his mundane foot, and said. Mordred is the young CEO of the Valor Group, which is a private conglomerate that basically controls the city. The politicians, the courts, the police, pretty much everyone is in their pocket, so he is all but untouchable. Effie raised her eyebrows. What? How is that even possible? I mean, a private company having more power than the government, let alone the people. That sounds completely implausible, does it not? Sunny shrugged. Sure, sounds far-fetched. But we are in an imaginary realm, remember. It's only reasonable that some things here will be entirely fantastical, not at all based in reality. He wasn't sure how things worked before the dark times, but a society completely ruled by money and private interest seemed like too irrational a concept to have existed. Human greed was boundless, after all, so who in their right mind would base a world order around that? Imagining what would happen to the world if Aiko was in charge, Sunny was suddenly covered in cold sweat. By the dead gods, let's hope that she never becomes a sovereign. He smiled weakly and shook his head. Well, think about the great clans. Could the government, let alone the people, have done anything against them? No, in that sense, the Valor Group is not that different from the great clan Valor. Sunny sighed. Saint has become a hotshot psychiatrist in an elite, high-security mental hospital. While Morgan is a patient in that hospital. Effie looked at him in surprise. What, Morgan is in an insane house? He nodded. Yes, I saw her myself, actually, she told me to find you. It was just that I had no idea who you were when she did. Effie frowned. Morgan knew who she was, too. That makes two of us who weren't brainwashed by this place, and one of you who was. What makes you different? No, wait, why did she tell you to find me? How did she even know that I am here with you? Sunny remained silent for a little while, then shook his head. I don't know why you two weren't affected by Mirage City. As for the rest, I don't think Morgan knew that you were here. She told me to find you for a reason, though, think about it, how did I regain my senses? Effie blinked a couple of times. Well, we roughed those thugs up, then you just sort of did. After I told you to snap out of it. Sunny nodded again. Indeed, you touched me and told me to snap out of it. And I did. I don't think it was a coincidence, either, rather, I think that you have some authority here as the master of Bastion. That was why Morgan told me to find you. That was indeed the most logical conclusion. Sunny would have loved to believe that he regained his senses thanks to the power of friendship. After all, Kai had managed to return him from the mire of Shadow Dance by reminding him of those he cared about, but he knew that something more was at play here. This place, Mirage City, was no mere illusion. It was fantasy made reality, fueled by the fantastical power of the demon of imagination. It was no less real than any other place in the dream realm, and what Sunny had escaped from was not merely a delusion, it was the sorcery of a demon. No matter how highly he thought of himself, he knew he was not powerful enough to overcome the will of Mirage, the demon of imagination. Instead, he had regained his sense of self through a mechanism built by her into the Great Mirror. Effie grinned. Oh, it's nice to know that I have some authority here, not that I feel very authoritative. I don't think that I can control this place freely, nothing I tried really worked until now. It's as if something is blocking my way. Sunny looked at her darkly. Well, naturally, after all, someone has stolen your, let's call it administrator rights. She pursed her lips, pouting, then gave Sunny an inquisitive look. Darn thieves. What do we do, then? Quote, he shrugged. Isn't it obvious? Find the bastard, get your control of the component back, find what I am looking for, and get the hell out of here. Sunny thought for a bit, and then added in a morose tone. Of course, it won't be very easy. Because we must achieve all that, while playing the roles of a jaded detective who doesn't play by the rules and his perky young partner flawlessly. 2465 Buried evidence. Effie changed her posture and leaned forward a little. Then, she smiled languidly while looking at Sunny. Perky young partner, huh? Well, I sure am perky, thanks for noticing, I guess, but young. I think you're younger than me. Sunny let out a heavy sigh and suppressed the desire to palm his face. He stared the grinning woman in the eye and responded in a slightly disgruntled tone. Age is a relative. I might have been born a couple of years later than you, but have I lived less than you? At this point, even I am not sure. Among other things, I am living 7 lives at the same time. Does that mean that I am aging 7 times faster? Who knows, I definitely don't. Point is, the devil detective is your counterpart senior. So, treat me accordingly. Effie's grin widened a little, and her eyes glistened. All right, big brother. Sunny shuddered. No, none of that, never. She batted her eyelashes innocently, then leaned back and shrugged. Well, whatever. In any case, what is our next step? Sunny contemplated her question for a while. Eventually, he frowned. Our target is Mordred, the CEO of the Valor Group. Besides him, there are 2 secondary persons of interest, Saint and Morgan. Saint does not seem to remember herself, acting out the role assigned to her by the Great Mirror. That of his inordinately gorgeous therapist. Who talked. Sunny remembered the bizarre experience of seeing, and hearing, the human version of Saint. Now that he had regained his sense of self, he did not know how to feel about that. It was fascinating, a little thrilling, but mostly, it felt completely and utterly wrong. He cleared his throat, then continued. You must not know a lot about Saint, but she can become an extremely valuable ally to us, as long as we manage to remind her of who she is. More importantly, she can help us gain access to Morgan. His expression darkened. Saint is valuable, but Morgan is priceless. What we lack the most at the second is information, and she seems to know a lot about what is going on, much more than we do, at least. However, getting to her won't be easy. That asylum is like an impenetrable fortress, built to prevent anyone from both getting in and getting out. Sunny lingered for a moment, and then added somberly. As for Mordred, well, he is probably the most well-guarded person in Mirage City. We don't know whether he remembers himself or not, all we know is that he is somehow connected to the Nihilist case. Quote, Effie raised an eyebrow. Oh, wait, before, the devil detective mentioned that he knew who the Nihilist was, and that he only needed concrete evidence to prove it. Don't tell me that he meant the most powerful person in the city. When Sunny remained silent, Effie's eyes widened. The young CEO of the Valor Group, Mordred, that creep, goes around gruesomely murdering people at night. Sunny sighed. The devil detective was sure that it was Mordred, but I am not. He had a reason to hate that guy, though. Frowning, Sunny tried to parse through the vague, dreamlike memories of his counterpart. There were facts, there were emotions, there were thoughts and suspicions, all painted in dark hues by hatred, obsession, and insomnia. After a while, he explained. Everyone thinks that the Nihilist has never left any clues behind, but actually, that is not true. There was a piece of evidence at the first crime scene, a blood sample that did not belong to the victim. That DNA test revealed that it belonged to none other than the heir of Valor Group, Mordred. Effie arched her eyebrows. What? There was evidence connecting him to the crime scene. Why is he still walking free, then? Sunny smiled bitterly. Because he had an ironclad alibi. There was video evidence proving that Mordred was on the other side of the city when the murder took place, so, the higher-ups chose to suppress the investigation. The blood sample was destroyed, and everyone who had come in contact with it was threatened into silence. He shook his head. The devil detective was the person in charge of the case, though, and he refused to let go. He believed that the video recording had been doctored, so the investigation into the Valor Group and its CEO continued with the Homicide Division captain's silent approval. Effie looked at him in confusion. What happened next? Sunny remained silent for a while, then said in an even tone. The captain got into an unfortunate accident and passed away. My counterpart was convinced that she was killed because of the investigation and tried to accost Mordred, getting into an altercation with his security team. Needless to say, that was an unwise decision. The Nihilist had become a public menace by then, though, so they could not simply get rid of me. Instead, I was sent to a court-mandated psychological counseling and suspended pending a psychiatric evaluation. He sighed. And here we are. Effie considered his words for a while, then smiled faintly. So that is why you were so excited when those thugs pointed at the Valor Group. The identity of the latest victim gives us an excuse to dig into Mordred again. Sunny nodded. Yes, they can bury a blood sample, but, ironically enough, they can't bury a corpse. Now that a person directly tied to Valor was killed by the Nihilist, we can openly investigate them, and nobody will be able to pressure us into giving up that lead without risking an avalanche of public outrage. Effie smiled. So, the first thing we need to do is figure out how exactly that Black Snake kid was connected to the Valor group, right? That will give us an official reason to approach Mordred. And once we approach Mordred, Sunny smiled darkly, we'll play it by ear. Oh, by the way, Morgan told me something else back when I saw her. His smile turned cold all of a sudden. She told me that Mordred can actually be killed here. Effie raised an eyebrow. You're not planning to just assassinate him in broad daylight, are you? Sunny lingered for a few moments, then shook his head with a sigh of regret. No, that would probably be out of character for the Devil Detective. He looked at Effie and smiled. It does sound tempting, though. 2466 Changing the World. The Mirage City Center for Troubled Youths, a charitable organization set up by the Valor Group to help delinquent youths find their place in society, was situated some distance away from the ramshackle diner. Sunny remembered how to properly fuel the Devil Detective's archaic PTV and stopped at a gas station, then checked his mental map of Mirage City and hesitantly plotted the course. As they drove, the quaint vistas of the ancient city slowly ceased to look so odd. He was getting used to the odd architecture, the abundance of noisy PTVs, the lack of quarantine zones, and the flat nature of it all. The people were the strangest, though, even if it took him a while to realize what that strangeness was. It was the lack of fear. The people of Mirage City all had their worries, of course, but their eyes lacked the subtle alertness that all humans of the waking world shared. A nightmare gate could open in front of them at any moment. After all, a sleeper who had slipped through the cracks could turn into a nightmare creature and go on a rampage. The humans of the waking world had grown accustomed to the constant threat of a sudden, senseless death and did not allow it to interfere with their lives. But that fear still left a mark on them. Here in Mirage City, though, there was no such threat. People were not immortal, but all the dangers they faced were mundane. They did not suffer the existential dread that the inhabitants of reality did, and were not ruled by a great and sinister power they were powerless against, the nightmare spell. Sunny wondered what it would have felt like, to live in a world that was free of the tyranny of nightmares. To live without fear, they would probably invent fears of their own, and live in a prison built of those. Effie looked at him for a while, then asked in a lazy tone. Hey, partner, I've been thinking. Sunny suppressed a groan. That didn't bode well. About what? Effie lingered for a moment, then shrugged with a grin. It's just that, wasn't this adventure supposed to prepare me for becoming a sovereign? But instead, I ended up becoming mundane, 3 whole ranks further away from supremacy than I used to be. How come Kai gets to battle dreadful fallen deities, but I am stuck fist-fighting third-rate thugs while dodging the advances of another who thinks that he's my husband? That's just not fair. Sunny gave her a sidelong glance. This adventure is indeed meant to help prepare you for the 4th nightmare. But Kai and you are different people. What you need to learn is different, too. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what is it that you think I must learn? He exhaled slowly. Well, about that, actually, I am not too sure. You are a deceptive person, but in a different way from me. Effie stared at him in confusion for a while, then exploded with laughter. Me, a deceptive person? What are you talking about? I am an open book. Sunny scoffed. This is exactly what I am talking about. There are 2 of you, really. There is Effie, raised by wolves, a cheerful and easygoing woman who glides through life without taking anything too seriously. This is who everyone meets. But beneath it all, there is also Athena, born from being eaten alive, an astute and calloused person who had to fight desperately for each step she had taken in this world. This one, most people fail to see, but I know that she's there. Effie studied him for a few moments, then whistled and looked away. Wow, you are hopeless, you know that. Sunny raised an eyebrow. No, I don't. What are you talking about? She chuckled. I mean, you just can't imagine that an astute person can be cheerful and easygoing, can you? Listen, you morose killjoy, you're entirely wrong. There is only one of me. I am not hiding behind a false facade of cheerfulness. I just know how to enjoy life, even if it seems too bitter to swallow at times. Sunny smiled faintly. Too bitter to swallow, it's all food metaphors with you, huh? He remained silent for a bit, then shrugged. Point is, Kai lacks confidence in himself. But you don't, on the contrary, you know exactly what you want, and you are not afraid to get it. In fact, I think that this is exactly the problem. You have already gotten everything you wanted. you've built the kind of life for yourself that leaves you entirely satisfied. So, you are not desperate enough. Effie raised an eyebrow. Me, not desperate enough. I feel desperate way too often, partner. Every time I look at my husband and at my son, I feel desperate to protect them. Because I know all too well what is coming for all of us. Her voice had turned somber, losing its usual carefree tone for a short moment. Sunny shook his head. That is the thing, though. A sovereign is someone who can reshape the world to fit their will, so, all supremes are born from a desperate wish to change the world. Otherwise, where would their determination to reshape it come from? But you don't want to change the world. Rather, you want to make sure that the world maintains its shape, because it already fits you. You are the only person I know who is truly satisfied with their life, and that, I am not sure if that is enough. Sunny was suddenly reminded of a conversation he had had with Effie a long time ago. He had shared his desire to be stronger than Neffy's, and Effie told him that he would never be stronger than Neffy's unless he found conviction. That was one of the reasons he had undertaken a perilous journey to Antarctica, in the end. What he was telling her now wasn't exactly the same, but he still couldn't help but feel that their roles were reversed. Effie remained silent for a while, then sighed. Is it such a sin, to be satisfied with one's life? Sunny shook his head. No, it's not. In fact, if you know some secret way to achieve that, please teach me. Effie laughed, then looked at him with a grin. Ah, so you want me to teach you about satisfaction. Okay, listen well, it's time for another one of Auntie Effie's lessons. Sunny's eyes widened. Oh, no, he suddenly realized that he was trapped in a PTV with her, with nowhere to escape. 2467 A troublesome discovery. The Center for Troubled Youths looked strangely tranquil and picturesque after the busy concrete jungle of the city. It was situated in a quiet neighborhood, taking up most of it. The grounds were surrounded by a neat fence, spacious enough to accommodate a modest park and a good collection of sports facilities, starting from a football field and ending with several tennis courts. There were not a lot of the aforementioned troubled youths in sight, considering the pouring rain, but the buildings themselves looked clean and well maintained. There was a main building where classes took place, 2 dormitories, a cafeteria hall, and so on. Overall, the youth center looked like a campus of a prestigious, well-to-do university. There was even a street musician on the corner, playing a peaceful tune on an old guitar while hiding under a large black umbrella. Sunny and Effie looked at each other warily. After a while, he said, "The more innocent it looks." Effie ended the sentence with a frown. "The creepier it usually is." Neither of them liked the idea of the Valor Group and Mordred collecting young delinquents in an unassuming private facility, supposedly to help them. Who knew what kind of shady things were going on here? After hesitating for a while, Sunny sighed. "You go talk to whoever is in charge here. I'll look around." They presented their badges to the security guard at the entrance and were admitted inside after some mild resistance. Effie headed for the main building to find the director of the youth center, while Sunny lingered at the gate for a while before leaving to explore the territory. They met back at the car some time later, both wearing troubled expressions. "What did you find?" Sunny's voice was even. Effie studied him for a bit, then said somberly. "You first." He sighed. "Well, it seems completely normal." Her expression cleared. "Right, I found absolutely nothing to suggest that there's something shady going on in this place. The director is a very nice old lady. She told me everything I needed to know, and was genuinely upset to learn that the kid had been killed." Sunny scratched the back of his head. "Right, I walked around the whole territory and even spoke to a few residents. Everything seems above board. The youths are content, well cared for, and happy. There are no odd vibes, no creepy undertones, nothing suspicious at all. From everything I saw, it seems like a completely legitimate charitable organization that is both funded well and managed well, with everyone doing their hardest to make sure that these kids receive a bright future." They stared at each other in utter confusion. Why would Mordred run a real charity? And do so earnestly, voluntarily, and with no secret agenda to boot? Sunny did not have shadow sense at the moment, while his other senses had been suppressed to the level of a mundane person. However, he still had his experience, instinct, and intuition, and yet, everything was telling him that there was nothing sinister or shady about the Center for Troubled Youths. Even the Devil Detective's dormant hostility could not find fault with this place. Effie scratched the back of her head. Very weird. Sunny was inclined to agree. It was indeed extremely weird, but there was nothing they could do about it. In fact, why would they want to do something? It was odd to be unhappy that the youths weren't being exploited for nefarious purposes. He shook his head. Anyway, did you find out anything? Effie remained silent for a moment, then nodded. Oh, yes, sure. The victim was indeed a resident of this youth center at some point. However, he graduated successfully around a year ago. Many of these kids either get sponsored by the Valor Group and go on to receive higher education or are helped with seeking employment. The Valor Group has countless entry-level positions, so, most of the latter end up being employed internally. Sunny raised an eyebrow. So, the victim was an employee of the Valor Group. Effie nodded. Indeed. In fact, he worked in its corporate security branch. Basically, he was a security guard. And not only that, he was posted in the Valor Group's main office. Sunny's gaze grew sharper. Oh, meaning, Effie grinned. Indeed, he had a chance to interact with Mordred on a daily basis. So if you wanted a reason to go and pay that bastard a visit, congratulations. Wishes do come true. Sunny smiled darkly, then looked at the sky. The sky was obscured by a thick layer of clouds, so he grimaced and looked at his watch instead. Then, he cursed quietly. Hey, how the hell do I read time from an analog watch? Effie blinked a couple of times. What's an analog watch? It took them a couple of minutes to figure out the barbaric technology of the bygone era. Determining that it was already evening, Sunny sighed. I don't think we'll be able to catch Mordred at work at the moment. So, let's pay him a visit tomorrow morning. Effie shrugged. Sure. So, are we clocking out, then? Her voice was lacking enthusiasm, which prompted Sunny to give her a long look. If you don't want to go home, you can crash at my place. Granted, the devil detective was not the cleanest of people, but since I doubt that you'll be scared away by a little mess, it should be fine. She smiled. Is that your way of calling me a slob? In any case, thanks, but no thanks. I don't think that abandoning her children and spending the night at an odd man's place would be in character for my counterpart. So, I'll head home. She looked around, then added sheepishly. Or rather, I'll trouble you to drive me home, partner. I barely figured out how to get to the crime scene after receiving the call. Now, I am completely turned around. Sunny sighed and unblocked the archaic PTV. Sure, no problem. Get in, partner. 2468 Home Bitter Home. It was already late when Sunny returned to his dark, dusty apartment. Unlocking the door, he walked inside, closed it, then gave it a long look. How fun. The door was made from a sheet of ordinary metal, while the walls around it were nothing but concrete panels. In other words, even a dormant nightmare creature could easily rip through the door or crash through the walls, but then again, there were no abominations in this world. So, these pitiful safety measures could very well stop anyone uninvited from entering the apartment. That said, the devil detective was a paranoid guy, and for a good reason. As a cop, he had a lot of enemies, and his nasty temperament did not earn him any friends either. So, one of the empty bottles scattered around the apartment actually served a purpose. Following a habit that belonged to someone else, Sunny locked the door and carefully balanced the bottle on its handle. That way, if someone picked the locks and tried to enter quietly in the middle of the night, the bottle was going to fall and break loudly, alerting him to the presence of an intruder. Sunny was usually guarded by one of the shadows, so this level of caution felt both unfamiliar and new. Turning away from the door, he studied his place of residence. Dust everywhere, empty bottles and plastic food containers scattered on the floor, oil stains and streaks on every glass surface. With a sigh, Sunny removed the bottle from the door handle and opened the curtains. Then, he rolled up his sleeves and got to cleaning. An hour or two later, after a few visits to the nearby trash containers, the apartment finally started to resemble a place suitable for human life. Locking the door once more, Sunny lowered himself into a threadbare armchair and let out a heavy sigh. It was ridiculous to admit, but this little amount of physical activity had tired him out. His muscles ached, not from battling some awful nightmare creature, but from fighting mundane thugs and dust. Such an indignity. He was sleepy. Before dragging his tired body to the bed, however, Sunny took the primitive communicator out of his pocket, struggled against the unfamiliar interface for a while, and finally managed to dial the number Saint had given him. For a few moments, odd noises poured into his ear. Then, the enthralling voice of his supposed therapist resounded from the communicator, making Sunny shiver against his will. Yes. He lingered for a few moments, then spoke in a neutral tone. Dr. Saint, good evening. This is Detective Sunless from Mirage PD. I wanted to discuss future therapy sessions. A few minutes later, he put down the communicator and closed his eyes. The echoes of Saint's voice were still resounding in his ears. This is so strange. To hear her talk. Before Sunny knew it, he fell into the soft embrace of sleep. In a different part of Mirage City, earlier, Effie had spent a long time standing in front of the door of a small, cozy villa. Eventually, she took a deep breath, put on a bright smile, and walked in. Mummy, Mama, two energetic kids rushed to her, their faces shining with happiness and adoration. Effie leaned down to catch them, then lifted them into the air, feeling little arms wrap around her neck and kisses being planted on her cheeks. Mommy is home, Mama, Mama. Failing to resist the overflowing cuteness, Effie nuzzled the children. Her forced smile gradually turned into a natural one. Oh, my, who are these little darlings? Are you my kids? No way, my precious children were way smaller when I left home. How did you grow up this much in just a day? Huh, if this continues, you'll be carrying Mommy instead by the end of the week. The children giggled as he brought them into the living room. No, Effie let the babysitter go, then got busy caring for the children herself. She prepared them food with unfamiliar ingredients, read them unfamiliar books, played unfamiliar games with them, and helped them wash in an unfamiliar bathroom. Her counterpart's children were younger than her dumpling was. He had grown up too fast, which left her feeling wistful. So, spending time with these little cuties lifted her mood. Of course, they weren't children at all. The cute little boy and the adorable little girl who called her mommy were the others, the terrifying, unfathomable beings forced into the shape of children by the Great Mirror. But they looked so real, and acted so real. More than that, her counterpart's dreamlike memories were still flowing like a hazy river in her mind. Memories full of real love and affection for these tiny bundles of joy and innocence, just like she was full of fierce love and affection for her own. It was a maddening contradiction, to find herself caring for little children who treated her like their mother, but were not hers, children who were innocent and pure, but at the same time monstrous and frightening. Effie could feel herself reeling. But despite all that, and even knowing better, she simply could not bring herself to treat them like monsters. Perhaps it was the mother in her, but the sight of the childlike smiles made her heart both flutter and ache. Ah, what am I going to do? At some point, her counterpart's husband returned from work. He was tall, he was handsome, he was gentle and sweet. But he wasn't her husband. He was not the man she loved. His features were different, his voice was different, his smile was different, and for that reason, everything about him was hateful. The kids were asleep, and now, it was time for her and her supposed husband to go to bed, too. However, Effie was not having it. Here, you go sleep on the couch. She handed the startled man a rolled-up blanket and a pillow. He looked at her with eyes full of confusion. Darling, what did I do? Effie smiled. Indeed, what did the poor guy do? She couldn't really tell him that there was only one man allowed into her bed, her husband, and that he was not that man, that he was not even a man. He was another pretending to be one. So, Effie employed a tactic tried and tested by numerous generations of women. Giving the other husband an offended look, she said in a wrathful tone. You have the gall to ask. Wow, just wow, go figure it out, you'll be sleeping on the couch until you do. The man paled. But, darling. Not hearing any objections, she pushed him out of the bedroom and slammed the door shut. Finally alone, Effie let out a relieved sigh. Looking at her empty bed, she then sighed again. Damn, was I swindled? I really can't see how any of this will help me become supreme. I want to go home. 2469 World of Abundance. The next morning, Sunny parked his PTV in front of Effie's home in a foul mood. She was standing there with a brown paper bag in her hand, holding the umbrella with the other and yawning. When he opened the door, she climbed in and gave him a reproachful look. You're late, Sunny cursed under his breath. Do you know what I had to do on the way here? Effie shrugged. No idea. Why? Sunny gave the steering wheel of the PTV an annoyed push. I had to refuel this piece of junk. Again, she stared at him in shock. What? No way. These things need to be refueled daily. He nodded a few times. That's what I'm saying. That pungent, flammable fuel. Turns out, they burn through it faster than I burn through essence. Effie blinked a couple of times, then shook her head and put on her seatbelt. No, but really, daily. What a hassle. Sunny was inclined to agree. As they drove to their destination, Effie explained what she managed to salvage from her counterpart's memory last evening. Most of it had to do with police procedures and protocols they had to follow, paperwork, briefing the press, coordinating with other teams, and so on. Actually, I already received a phone call from the captain. There is going to be a press conference tomorrow afternoon, where I am supposed to make a statement to answer a few questions. The journalists are dying to know about the nihilist and his latest victim. Obviously, they are also dying to castigate the police department and lament the lack of progress in catching him. I'm the designated punching bag, I guess. Sunny smiled faintly. That should be nothing new for you, though. You've been the propaganda machine's favorite ever since the Forgotten Shore. Remember those posters of you they plastered all around NQSC? The first batch, I mean. Effie stared at him for a few moments, then laughed. Oh, gods, you saw those? Wow, made an impression, did I? Well, her armor certainly did. Sunny scoffed. Some of them took entire facades of huge buildings. You were hard to miss. She grinned and looked into the window, at the colorful billboards decorating the buildings of Mirage City. They were propaganda posters, as well, only of a different, far more subtle kind. Instead of the government pushing a false narrative onto its citizens to control the population, these were made by private enterprises to manipulate people into consuming their goods. It was hard to tell which was more invasive. It is both wonderful and sinister, don't you think? Sunny raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She pointed to the city outside the window. This world, a world of abundance. Of prosperity so extreme and staggering that it has become a problem in and of itself. A world that is based on endless growth, and therefore can never allow itself to slow down, even a little, even for a brief moment, no matter if there is still a reason to rush forward or not. Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then shrugged. To be honest, I am not very familiar with how the world was before the dark times. I only know the romantic version of it, the great golden age of humanity before all the problems started, and all that. A lost era of peace and prosperity. People usually talk about this time as some kind of a lost paradise. Effie smiled. I guess it was, for a while. As close to a paradise as we have ever come. She sighed. Of course, the construction of that paradise was financed by borrowing from The Future, which ended up causing all those problems to begin with, when the time to pay up arrived. Still, I like it here. She opened her paper bag and pulled out a small carton painted in brown and white. Do you know what this is? Sunny almost flinched. That tone, that glint in her eyes, he knew it all too well. It was the look of insatiable avarice and utter obsession, which Sunny himself wore when looking at soul shards and piles of treasure. What is she? Effie drew in a shaky breath. This just might be the greatest invention humanity has ever made. It is called chocolate milk. This era has it, but ours doesn't, so how can I be critical of the past? The world has really gone to crap since then. Opening the carton, she took a big sip and leaned back with a blissful smile. Ah, Sunny gave her a dubious look. Did you, by any chance, steal this from your kids? Effie gave him a look of outrage. What? Of course not. They still have apple juice, okay. Sunny shook his head reproachfully. Well, do you at least have another carton so I could try it, too? Effie brought the paper back closer to her chest, looking at him defensively. No, he looked at her in indignation. You didn't just go on and on singing praises to this chocolate milk of yours without planning to share it with your senior, did you? Effie stared at him with an open mouth for a while. Listen, senior, I'm a growing girl. Sunny almost choked. A growing girl? Where are you planning to grow? If you grow any more, your head will punch through the roof. Effie grinned. What, jealous? Instead of answering, Sunny snatched her paper bag. Hey, give it back. The car swayed slightly, continuing on its way. Soon enough, they reached the headquarters of the Valor Group. The building was hard to miss. It was almost the same height as the dormitory hives in NQSC, towering above the landscape like a glass spire. It was impossible to see it tip when standing on the ground below, no matter how much one craned their neck, and trying was enough to make one's head spin. Effie whistled. You know, the Valor Group used to have its main offices in a different skyscraper, which was the tallest building in Mirage City. But then, a different conglomerate built one that was even taller. And then a third conglomerate built one even taller than that, until the Valor Group built this one, which is the current tallest. She grinned. These guys really like to measure whose tower is the biggest, huh? I wonder what can be behind their obsession with tower sizes. Sunny stared at the glass skyscraper for a few moments. I'm not really interested in their tower measuring contests. By the way, what does the Valor Group even do? I mean, what's their business? Effie scratched her head. Everything is their business. Your communicator. They made it. UPTV. They built it. Your apartment complex. They both built it and own it. Your furniture, your clothes, your food, your cops, your politicians, anything you point at in Mirage City, chances are, it exists because of the Valor Group. Sunny remained silent for a while. How bizarre. Then, he looked at her and smiled. So, let's go take the CEO of the Valor Group down, shall we? Effie chuckled. I thought you'd never ask. 2470 Glass Spire. The lobby of the Valor Tower was as glamorous and quietly oppressive as its exterior, so much so that Sunny and Effie, the only two people not wearing smart business suits here, looked woefully out of place. Effie was stunning enough to turn heads, but her lackadaisical athleisure ensemble seemed too casual and slop-row-y. As for Sunny, his cheap, nondescript cop clothes looked outright shabby and inappropriate in this grandiose temple to money and power. Nevertheless, both carried themselves with absolute confidence, as if they owned the place, which only brought them more attention. Here we go. Walking over to the vast reception desk, Sunny showed his badge to the nearest receptionist. Detective Sunless and Detective Athena of Mirage PD. We are here to meet Mr. Mordred. The young woman looked between the two of them with a lost expression, at least for a moment. Then, her training kicked in. Her expression instantly changed to that of an extremely polite brick wall, and she said with a flawlessly neutral smile. Oh, I see. Do you have an appointment? Sunny mentally translated her words. No chance in hell. Be gone, peasants. Of course, not just anybody could meet the CEO of the Valor Group. In fact, very few people could, and a couple of lowly detectives were definitely not in that small, exceedingly elite club. He responded to the receptionist's smile with one of her own. No, do you have hearing loss? She blinked. Excuse me. Effie leaned on the desk languidly. My partner was wondering which part of what he had said you failed to hear. Was it, detective, or Mirage PD? Or do you just think that police officers have nothing to do all day and would seek out your CEO without a reason? We have an important and official reason to see him, so hurry up and get him into a room with us. Sunny raised an eyebrow and waved his badge in the air. Or are you blind? Did you perhaps not see our identification? The receptionist maintained her professional smile. I am not sure Effie shook her head and said loudly. Wait, no, they wouldn't keep a deaf, blind girl at the reception, that'd just be cruel. Perhaps they simply don't care that the nihilist is walking around killing people. By then, they were already being slowly surrounded by security guards, who weren't even trying to be subtle about it. Sunny sighed, and then added in a similarly loud tone. Killing people, including their own colleagues. My, what a shame. It seems that the Valor Group treats police officers with contempt and is refusing to help the investigation. Are they just callous, or do they have something to hide? Goodness gracious, what a sad turn of events. He felt a little guilty about putting the poor receptionist on the spot. Gods knew she was probably just hoping to get through the day, but at the same time, she was guarding the gates of hell, so a bit of torment came with the territory. The security guards had surrounded him and Effie by that point, looking at each other with troubled expressions. The loud voices had also gathered a small crowd. If office workers were known for one thing, it was that they often suffered from boredom. So, they were not going to miss a bit of drama to fuel the gossip. That was what Sunny wanted. He knew, of course, that getting to Mordred was not going to be simple. In fact, it was all but impossible in the short term. Even if an employee of the Valor Group had been killed by the nihilist, that did not mean that they could just go and interrogate the CEO. They would have to go through a chain of increasingly important people first, starting from some poor exec and working their way upward from there. So, he was fully prepared for that long and arduous process. Making a scene in the lobby was merely the first step. The threat of a public disturbance would force someone in the hierarchy of the Valor Group to appease them, which was going to be a start. Effie sighed and reached into her paper bag to produce a sandwich. Unwrapping it slowly, she said, Well, what can we do? I guess I won't have anything to tell the press tomorrow, just that our attempts at cooperation with the Valor Group were, sadly, met with a pronounced lack of enthusiasm. It just breaks my heart to imagine what people will say the next time the nihilist strikes. Could it have been prevented? Could the Valor Group have helped? I guess we'll never know. The receptionist paled a little, then exchanged a series of glances with a senior colleague. Finally, she smiled weakly. Oh, no, I'm afraid you misunderstood, detectives. Let me contact a superior and see what I can do. Please make yourself comfortable. Would you like a cup of coffee? Sunny once again translated her words. Shut up and stop making a scene, bastards. Go sit in a corner like good children while we find a scapegoat to entertain you for a bit. At the same time, an avalanche of phone calls would probably descend on the homicide division captain, who would get screamed at by half a dozen people to remind him to keep his subordinates under control. Sunny glanced at the nervous security guards, then at the receptionist. Eventually, he shrugged. I don't want coffee. Do you have chocolate milk? The receptionist gave him a very odd look. Wah, I'm not sure. Sunny frowned. Then that won't do. But before he could continue to apply pressure to hopefully get a more important scapegoat, and therefore shave off a couple of steps to the unreachable, deific CEO of the all-powerful Valor Group, a pleasant voice suddenly resounded from behind. Excuse me, perhaps I can help. Sunny froze. Effie did, too. They glanced at each other tensely, then slowly turned around. Behind them, a striking man in an immaculately tailored, slightly flamboyant yet elegant suit was standing in a circle of bodyguards. He seemed to be around 30, tall and in perfect shape, with pale skin and raven black hair. His face was on the sharper side, not exactly handsome, but at the same time charming and strangely beautiful. Everything about him screamed of wealth and class, the emerald fabric of his bespoke suit, the subtle splendor of his luxury watch, the precious gemstones on his cufflinks and tie pin. But more than wealth, the man emanated the feeling of power. It was a different kind of presence from the oppressive aura his father used to possess. Instead, the man seemed friendly and mild. And yet, anyone could tell that he was someone extraordinary simply because of how absolutely relaxed and at ease he seemed, as if nothing in the world could possibly pose a problem to him. His tie was loose, and a few buttons of his designer shirt were stylishly missing. There was an easy, relaxed smile on his face, and a spark of curiosity in his strange eyes, his eyes that resembled two pools of liquid silver, reflecting the world back on itself. Noticing their strange expressions, the man blinked a few times. Oh, where are my manners? Allow me to introduce myself. But of course, the man needed no introduction. He was the young CEO of the Valor Group. Mordred.